I was doing a podcast yesterday, and one of the subjects which came up was the racism that I identified in UKIP, and I went through the story and how I explained to Farage that you can't toss this off over a pint of beer. And racist jokes which occur in school, as Rees-Mogg identified on a GB News piece a few days ago, specifically whether the right response is punishment, criminalization, or education. That is a big issue today, where we've got the rise of hate speech legislation, and as in this particular case, a 12-year-old boy in Kent, an older boy, who was given a detention for telling a joke lifted directly from a Roald Dahl book, Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator, that he'd found in the school's own library. And he says he was, well, effectively bullied by the head of classics and by the Latin teacher after telling this joke. And the case highlights it shines a light on a wider problem, our society's reflex to punish rather than educate, to silence rather than explain. And in this instant, the boy, Andre, repeated Dahl's joke. I'm going to repeat it now. Why is it difficult to make telephone calls in China? Because there are so many wings and so many wongs, you might wing the wong number. And staff called it racist, which of course it is. Grilled him without explanation and issued a 2-hour detention. His father protested, his father Greg, rightly asked, how are children supposed to know where the line is if you won't even explain it? This is not education, it's moral policing without moral reasoning. Now, was the joke offensive? Yes, it plays on the frequency of certain Chinese surnames, and many would find it lazy, stereotypical, or tasteless. It's the same sort of joke, actually, that caused me to kick up a fuss about UKIP. In my case, it was about a man, an imbecile of a man, really, called, what was his name? I can't even remember his name now. Man in a kilt, who confused the name of Humza Yusuf, a minister of the Crown, not at that point First Minister, but a sort of right hand to Nicola Sturgeon, confused him with Abu Hamza, a convicted criminal with hooks for hands, serving a sentence in New York for terrorism. And the only reason for that confusion was the fact that the name seemed unfamiliar to this UKIP MEP. That is racism. Poking fun at somebody's name simply because it seems unfamiliar and different. That is about stereotyping, that is about diminishing, and that is tasteless and racist. Is it hateful? That's another matter. Does it incite violence? Another matter. It's mild, it's wordplay-based stereotyping of the kind found throughout older British humour. Indeed, it's printed in a book. The racist joke that the boy told is printed in a book in the school that the school itself endorses. If we cannot talk about why it might be problematic, if our only tool is punishment, then we teach children nothing except fear. And detentions, and especially hate crime legislation, are blunt instruments. Punishment doesn't foster understanding, it drives views underground. It sows resentment, it encourages hypocrisy. Say the right things in public, think what you want in private. More dangerously, it creates chilling effects on speech itself. Children become afraid to speak at all. We see this here. Andre's friend reported being constantly stressed about what he could or couldn't say. Is this the atmosphere we want in our schools? An atmosphere where curiosity is replaced by anxiety. There we are. Coburn is the name of the former MEP for UKIP, who was who made the racist joke, and Farage passed it off. He said, well, it's just a joke. Can't you take a joke? And I think a joke is supposed to be something funny, rather than rather than the besmirching of somebody's name. The musical South Pacific contains a very interesting song. You've got to be taught to hate and fear. You've got to be taught from year to year. You've got to be taught to hate. And it's the perfect reminder that prejudice is learned, but so is empathy. If we want children to understand why a joke might be offensive, we have to talk about it. We have to ask, why do you think that's funny? How might someone else hear it? Does it reduce people to a stereotype? And this approach is not permissive, it's rigorous. It requires children to think. It requires patience from the adults who are educating. It doesn't reward cruelty, it exposes it to light. Greg, the boy's father, pointed out that teachers use phrases like Jesus Christ freely, which he finds offensive as a Catholic. Why is one form of mockery overlooked while another is punished? And this selective endorsement and enforcement teaches children that rules are arbitrary, or worse, ideological. It teaches hypocrisy. Roald Dahl himself has a history of racism, of anti-Semitic comments, of colonial stereotypes in his books, and we cannot pretend that it isn't there. But nor do we need to ban his books, nor do we need to overwrite his books and doctor his books so that the racism is hidden. The same thing is true, of course, of Disney. The birds in Dumbo, the centaur, the baby centaur in Fantasia, completely obliterated now in later prints of the film. We need to acknowledge these things are there and point out that our world has changed, that we have learnt how demeaning to us and to people of a different race or gender or whatever, these stereotypes can be. It was normal then, it's not acceptable now. What is clever about his writing? What is harmful about his writing? What is clever about this depiction? What is harmful about this depiction? Here we have a perfect lesson in front of us. And yet the teachers in this absurd school chose to punish rather than educate. If we don't teach children to analyze, to criticize, to contextualize, then we fail them. And the same thing is true of this hate crime nonsense. If people are writing things in Twitter and posting them, if people are posting thoughtless, hateful statements simply because they've heard them before, then we need to educate rather than punish. And children will grow up unable to see nuance, unable to handle difference, unable to argue with anything except censorship. Censorship is the stuff that we see being abused in Russia. The way to deal with racism is to talk about it, not through detention, not through criminal law, but through education. Hatred is taught deliberately. Unteaching it must be equally deliberate. We need to model curiosity, we need to model empathy, and to encourage children and ourselves to question everything. That's the only way forward, the only way to move from a culture of fear to a culture of understanding.